Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice 12-game Major League Baseball slate. Should be a pretty good slate. We have a lot of good pitching opportunities. We also have good hitters across the board. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, drop a comment below with your home run calls today, and let me know what you think about doing FanDuel content for Major League Baseball going forward. I've just noticed the last week or so that the slates have been pretty rough over there, and I haven't really been playing it as much, and so I haven't really been wanting to make content because I don't like the slates. But just comment below if you're interested in the FanDuel stuff still. With that said, let's get into this DraftKings breakdown here. So we're going to start with our core plays. We have Alex Bregman, Anthony Santander, and Chase McCormick here in our Chaz McCormick here in our core plays. Let's get into our pitchers. We're going to start with Sandy Alcantara. Now, he's pretty expensive, but he projects pretty well here. The price has come down ever so slightly, so that does give him some upside. And he's got a decent matchup here. He also has a good straight K rate so far this season, so I do think he's got some utility. He does feel a little bit risky, but he seems pretty good, and he's had mostly good games this season. But his ceiling is probably not as high as some of the other options available. Joe Ryan is definitely a top tier play here against the Angels. Now, obviously, the Angels are not as terrible as they were last season, but he still feels a little bit safer than Alcantara, considering that he has a higher ceiling, and he's a little bit more consistent from that perspective as well. He's also got a good K rate, and I do think he's got some upside in this matchup. He's been doing pretty solid even against good teams, which he's faced a really tough schedule so far, so I like his upside, and he's definitely the top pitcher on the slate. James Paxton is in play here, and a decently plus matchup against San Diego. He actually had a really solid game against St. Louis in his first start this season, including 9 strikeouts, and he only pitched 5 innings, so that's a pretty solid rate there. If he can manage the strikeouts, even within 6 or 7, he should be good to go on the slate. It's a pretty decent matchup, and he's got some utility on this in this situation. Then we're going to look at Anthony Scalfanari. Discapani. I don't ever know how to say his name correctly, but at any rate, for the Giants, he has a good matchup here against Miami. And while he has been somewhat inconsistent this season, he has managed 5 starts that are really good. He's had 3 bad ones as well. He's also faced good opponents for a lot of these games, and he is a little bit discounted, which definitely gives him some upside in this matchup. And then we're going to look at Bryce Elder for Atlanta. Now, he's high risk, high reward in this situation. He's pitched really solidly, though some games he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, which hurts his fantasy potential. But he has managed to have some really good games this season, and he's got a good matchup here against Seattle. I don't think he'll give up many earned runs here. The real risk here is if he'll get enough strikeouts to really pay off. But he is in play as a GPP option on the slate. A couple other guys to consider would be Blake Snell, Kasuchi for Toronto, and Michael Kopech for the Chicago White Sox. With that said, let's get into our catchers. We're going to start with JT Realmuto for Philly. Now, he is in a pretty solid spot here against the Cubs pitching. He's got good metrics here. The price is up, but he's got good potential, and the weather should also benefit him in this situation. Not only that, but being in Philadelphia helps over Chicago as well. But he still feels a little bit risky. Sean Murphy is also in play for Atlanta. It's the same price. He's a good contrarian option off Realmuto if you want to go that route. And I do think he's got some good upside in this matchup. Then for a value play, we're going to look at Yan Gomes, who has really good potential in this matchup against Philly. I do like the home run ability here, and the weather should be good for some good scoring potential. And he's very cheap, so that gives him some upside. You can also consider Blake Sabal, Francisco Alvarez, and Ryan Jeffers on this particular slate at this position. Maybe in the first base, we'll look at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Now, this is depending on if he plays today, which he should. It looks like he will likely play in this game. And if he does, then he will be a viable option as a top-tier start against a subpar pitcher. And I really like the matchup and metrics for him on the slate, assuming he does draw the start. Jose Abreu is a very high-risk value play on the slate. He hasn't hit the ball very well this season, but he's starting to get some hits the last 5 or 6 games. I do like his upside, especially the metrics here have him home run potential. Even though he hasn't hit home run yet this season, he definitely has the potential. He's just been striking out like crazy. So he's high risk, high reward, but he's also cheap. Ryan Mountcastle is probably the best. Oops, no. Okay, there he is. He's probably the best play on the slate at this position. He's priced a little bit up, but he is got some really good metrics for this matchup and great upside. Now, there are a lot of guys to consider at this position due to it being first base. Nelson Cruz, Brandon Belt, Pete Alonso, Matt Olson, Vinny Pasquanto, Donovan Solano, Nate Lowe, and Josh Naylor are also all in play on this slate. Moving into second base, we're going to look at Jose Altuve, who looks like he'll be back today for the first time. If he draws a start, he's definitely in consideration here. Now, he didn't have a very good rehab stint in the minors, but he definitely has the potential to jump in here and have a really big game, as we know he's capable of doing. He is risky, though, so especially if he's back for his first game. Marcus Semien is also in play, and he's about the same price as Altuve, and he's a lot safer. If you want, a top tier option and a good matchup, this is definitely a guy. I really do like Texas today a lot. And then for a good cheaper option here is Morel for Chicago Cubs. He has had some absolutely monster games to start his season. He hasn't played in a ton of games, but when he draws the starts, he's been hitting the ball extremely well, hitting a whopping 371 to start. That probably won't maintain, but as you can see, he has had a hit in every single game he's played so far this season. If he draws a start, he'll be a great option on the slate. Also consider Mookie Betts, Donovan Solano, and Jeff McNeil at second base. And moving into third base, we'll look at Alex Bregman, who I think is a core play today. He's had some ups and downs to start the season, but he's had 2 home runs in the last 3 games. He's starting to hit the ball pretty well. I like his upside. He's got a great matchup, and this game should be a high-scoring game for Houston, and he's priced really fairly, too. But if you want to come off of him, you can look at Patrick Wisdom, who has just as much upside. He's also hit the ball really well, though his batting average is lower, and his batting average isn't ideal, and his home runs, he hasn't had one in a few games. But he definitely has the potential in this particular matchup in a great situation. And then for a value play here, we'll look at Kyle Farmer from Minnesota. The metrics here jump off the chart, and he's facing a pitcher that's struggling, and that really gives him some upside. He's had some really solid games, even when he doesn't hit home runs, and so I do like him as one of the better options on Minnesota. And he can also play third base or shortstop, which I actually think he's better at shortstop. But I'm also going to talk about Jeremy Pena here at shortstop. At $4,900, he does feel priced up, but his metrics are off the chart for this matchup, and he has a great chance to have a good game here. Corey Seager is also in play at this position for Texas. He has some really nice upside, despite the fact that he hasn't really hit any home runs so far this season, only the one. But he definitely has the potential, and he's got good metrics for this matchup. I expect Texas to be a very good team on this slate. And then Kyle Farmer can also play this position. You could also consider Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, and Bo Bichette at shortstop. I forgot to mention that at third base, you can also consider Jose Ramirez, Austin Riley, Jake Berger, and Mark Vientos. So keep those guys in mind. Moving into the outfield, we will start with Ronald Acuna, who is hitting the ball just about as good as anybody in the majors. His batting average has jumped up. He's had a tremendous run here of, I think, 7 out of the last 8 games with over 15 fantasy points, which is pretty incredible. He's had a home run in 4 straight games. He's got stolen base potential every time out. He's in the top few and stolen bases, and he has home run potential every time he comes up to bat. And if you put him on in any capacity, which he's getting walked more and more, then he has those stolen bases to go along with it. So I really like his upside. He's priced extremely high, makes him hard to roster, but he's definitely in play on the slate. Jordan Alvarez for Houston is also in play. Doesn't have quite the much upside as Acuna, and he's priced around the same, but he has big-time metrics in this situation and good upside and a very plus matchup, especially for a Houston stack. Bryce Harper is also in play here for Philly. He has hit the ball extremely well to start his season, and he has good matchup potential and home run potential in this situation. Then we'll look at Kyle Garlick as a value play here. He's, oops, not Car. What am I doing? Garlick for Minnesota. He's very cheap. He's only played in 3 games so far this season, but he should be back today. And if he does draw the start, then he'll be somebody to consider as a good matchup option, especially at a minimum price. He was borderline a core play, but he's just hadn't played enough games. Then we'll look at Anthony Santander, who I have as a core play here. Sorry about that. He has some really good metrics for this matchup. He's hit the ball pretty well lately. He started the season a little bit slow, but he's really starting to see the ball well and get hits and also home run potential. So I like his matchup, and he's priced just about as high as I want him to be before I would stop considering him. Suzuki for Chicago Cubs is in a really good matchup. He's hit the ball extremely well the last few games. I like his upside here. He's had 4 home runs in the last 4 games, including 2 home runs in his last game. I do like his potential. He's hitting the ball well, and that's where we like to use him because he will go on a streak of home runs at times. Then we'll look at McCormick, who I also think is a great value a core play here. He's hit the ball pretty well lately. He does have the lower floor than some, but he's been hitting very well. He's got a good matchup here against a pitcher that is really subpar. Then we'll look at Dalton Varsho for Toronto. He has some really interesting metrics for this matchup, despite the fact that he hasn't hit the ball well. He has home run potential, and he definitely draws a great start situation here, and so I do think he's worth a look. George Springer is virtually the same price as Varsho. He's also not hit the ball well so far this season, and even the home runs have not been coming at a high rate, but he definitely has the potential, and his price will not stay this cheap once he starts to get going this season. Luis Robert for Chicago White Sox feels like a really solid play. He's hit the ball extremely well lately. Even games where he doesn't have home runs, he's managing to score fantasy points. He's probably one of the best bright spots on the Chicago Cubs, on the Chicago White Sox. Why I say Cubs? He's got really good metrics for this matchup, and I like a guy like him where he's been hitting the ball really well. Austin Hayes is a good option as well on the slate, hitting the ball extremely solidly. He's a good option if you want to, especially if you want to stack the Baltimore outfielders here with him and Santander. You can definitely do that today, and he's got good metrics for this matchup. Then we'll look at Corey Julks for Houston as a Hail Mary play on the slate. He's hit the ball pretty solidly so far, especially the last 4 or 5 games, though he's not getting a ton of fantasy points in some of these, but he is hitting the ball, so if he can draw some home runs, he would definitely be a viable option here. And then also consider Stone Garrett, Michael Harris, Lane Thomas, Starling Marte, and Mike Trout at this position. So we have a lot of good options here. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.